Dear students, in this video we are going to learn about the concept of protection in operating system. The main objectives of this lecture is to discuss about the goals of protection, principles of protection, various types of protection models like domain of protection, access control matrix, access control list, capability based system, language based protection. Goals of protection. Operating system consists of collection of objects, hardware and software. Each object will be having a unique name and can be accessed through well-defined set of operations. Protection problem ensures that each object is accessed correctly and only by those processes that are allowed to do so. So that means in operating system we have collection of objects. Those objects are called like hardware, software and processes. Okay, each object will be having a unique name and can be accessed through a well-defined set of operations. For example, if file is an object, we can access through open a file, close a file, read a file, like that. Various operations are used to access the contents of the file. The protection problem will ensure that each object is accessed correctly and only by those processes that are allowed to do so. So only authorized processes are allowed to perform these operations on those objects. So the policies define how processes access the computer's resources such as CPU, memory, software and even the operating system. It is the responsibility of the operating system designer and app programmer to define these policies for those objects. And these policies can be modified at any instance of time based on the need by the programmer and operating system designer. Protection is a technique for protecting data and processes from harmful or intentional intrusions. It contains protection policies either established by itself, set by management, or imposed individually by programmers to ensure that their programs are protected to the great extent possible. So that means that the protection is a technique for protecting the data and processes from the unauthorized accesses or intentional intrusions. So therefore, protection policies are established by either by the management or by the individual user or programmer to ensure that their programs are protected from this unauthorized access to the greatest extent possible. So these are the goals of the protection. So the main goal is to ensure that the objects are accessed correctly and only by those processes that are authorized to do so. What are the principles of protections? Programs, users and systems should be given just enough privileges to perform their task. To ensure data security, process security and program security against unauthorized user accesses or program access. To ensure no access rights breaches, no viruses, no unauthorized accesses to the existing data. So that means the principles of protection is to ensure that there is enough privileges to perform the required task on those resources by the processes. To ensure that there is a data security, process security and program security against unauthorized users. To ensure that there is no breach of access rights, no virus threats, no unauthorized accesses to the existing data. These are the principles of protection. Here, in order to implement these protections, there are various models are available. So the first model is domain structure. The second model is access control list. Third model is access matrix. Fourth model is capability based model, role based model, language based model. So this is access matrix. This is access matrix. We call it as access control matrix also. So this is access matrix. First, let us discuss about the domain structure. Domain is nothing but set of access rights. It specifies what are all the objects and its associated rights in that domain. Likewise, there are a list of objects and their associated access rights are defined in the domain with some identification like D1, D2, D3 like domain names. So here the resources or processes are defined under these domains. If any process belonging to domain D1 have access on objects O1, O2 and O3, so the access rights for object 1 is the process which is under domain D1 can enjoy the rights of read write on object O1, and the process can have an execute permission for object 2. The process can have read write access to object 3. This is about the processes under domain D1. Coming to process under domain D2. The processes which are defined under domain D2 is having write access permission on object 2 and print access permission on object 4. So this is about the processes which are under domain 2 access rights. Coming to the processes which are defined under the domain D3, it have print permission for object 4, execute permissions for object 1, read permission for object 3. In this way, different varieties of domains are defined for the benefit of the processes in the operating system. And the process is associated with any specific domain to have the access rights for the objects in the system. This is about the domain structure. The operating system MULTICS implements this type of domain structure for specifying the access rights to various processes in the system. It is like a ringed model. For example, the inner ring is ring 0, then its outer ring is ring 1, likewise ring 2, ring 3. The last ring is ring n-1. If any process is belonging to a specific ring, it can utilize all the access rights defined in that particular ring. So, outer ring can include all the rights of its inner ring. So therefore, if any process is belonging to ring 1, for example, then it can access all the objects which are defined in ring 1 and their corresponding rights can be performed by the process. And in addition to ring 1 access rights, the process can also make use of all the object rights which are defined in ring 0. So that means ring 0 is a subset of ring 1. Ring 1 is a subset of ring 2. Ring n-1 is subset of ring n. So like that, outer ring includes inner ring or access rights by default. So in that way, if any process is belonging to any specific ring, it can obtain the all access rights defined in that ring plus the rights which are defined in its inner ring also. Next method of protection model is access matrix or access control matrix. Here the rights are defined in terms of the access matrix. So here Rows represent various domains, columns represents various objects. The each entry in the matrix defines what are all the rights on those objects in that domain. So likewise, the access matrix specifies what are all the rights for the objects in the domain. So example, D1 is a domain and its corresponding access rights for objects F1, F2, F3 and printer. These are all the objects. So the domain D1 is having read access permission for F1, read access permission for F3. Domain D1 do not have any access permission for F2 and printer. Then D2 domain, it is having a print access permission for printer. D3 domain having read permission for F2, execute permission for F3. D4 is having read write permission for F1, read write permission for F3. If any process is belonging to a specific domain, then it can enjoy the benefits of all the access rights defined in that domain. So what is the use of this access matrix? This access matrix can allow the system to define what are all the access rights for various objects under each domain. These domains can be static or dynamic in nature. So if it is a static domain, once the access permissions are defined for the domains at the beginning of creating the objects, then those access rights cannot be modified in the static method. Whereas in the dynamic method, these operations can be modified at any point of time in the future. Some special rights will also be there to the owner of the objects. The owner can modify the access rights belonging to any specific domain. He can also transfer the access rights from one domain to another domain. This privilege will be given to the owner of any object. The design of access matrix. The design of access matrix contains two parts. One is the access mechanism, another one is policy. Who define access mechanism? Who define the policy? Coming to access mechanism, operating system provides the access mechanism and it ensures that the matrix is only manipulated by the authorized agents and that rules are strictly enforced. Whereas the policy is defined by the user. He will define what access and what object and in which mode they can be operated. So these are all the two things defined for access matrix. Access control list. List of permissions attached to an object. It can be considered as one slice of access matrix is considered as one access control list. Like here, this is an access matrix. If we consider one row, this becomes access control list. So this access control list specifies what object is having what permissions. So the objects may be a file or a directory, it may be a device or it may be a process. And the permissions may be like what are the permissions for various types of users like owner, group and others in the system. So it does not specify all the list of users, whereas it specifies the users into three groups like owner of the file, group members of that particular file and other members for that particular file. In this way, the access control list will define access rights to various groups of the users in the system. The next protection model is capability based system. Here the capability is called as a token or it may be a key. So it is like whoever is having that capability like token or key, he is permitted to access that object. This is the methodology followed in the capability-based system. The granting and distribution access rights happen through the distribution of these capability tokens. So the user can pass the token along with the function call to show that he is having, that is, whoever is taking that function call is having an access to that particular function. Some of the historical system that makes use of this capability based system model is Hydra is one model, Cambridge CAP system is another model that uses this capability based protection mechanism, and in the present scenario Symbian and POSIX operating system and some web browsers uses this capability based systems as a protection mechanism. Role-based access control. In large organizations, it is very difficult to specify access rights to every user, every object likewise. So this granting the rights to every user, every object is like defining the access rights on a fine grain level. This type of fine grain level is not possible in case of large organizations. There we assign permissions based on the role of the user. We define the access rights. So every user will be assigned some role. The permissions are attached to the active roles. So the permissions may be like read, write, to execute permissions. And generally access control list define these permissions specific to an object, but whereas role based access control list will create an account and define the access rights for the user roles. This way, if any user is promoted, then he will acquire new role, and whatever access rights are defined for that new role, that can be provided to that user. So in this way, in a large organization, based on the hierarchy of the roles, the access rights can be defined. For example, like the system administrator is the top level user in the hierarchy. Under system administrator, there may be programmers. So under programmers, there may be some technical persons. So like that, so we can define what are all the access rights for the system admin, what are the access rights for the programmers, then what are all the access rights for the technical persons under these programmers. Likewise, we can define. This is role-based access control protection model. Coming to language-based protection model. Here, in operating system, language-based protection is a security measure that restrict programmers to use only those languages which are approved in the operating system. The user is not permitted to use his own language as he wish. So here the operating system will restrict only those programming languages which are approved. So this is called as language-based protection. This is generally used to prevent the execution of the malicious code, but can also be used to enforce corporate policies or limit the use of certain languages. So this policy generally is used to prevent the execution of the malicious code as well as to enforce the corporate policies to limit the use of certain languages. Languages that are typically restricted generally include assembly language, machine language, because they have direct access to the hardware to manipulate or to perform operations by directly interacting with the hardware components. So therefore, generally there will be a restriction on the usage of assembly language code and machine language code in the systems. Sometimes scripting languages are also restricted because they can be used to automate tasks and launch attacks. So therefore, the language-based protection protect the system by restricting some of the languages used. In some cases, language-based protection may be combined with other security measures such as digital rights management or access control list. So, language-based protection can also be combined with other protection models like digital rights or access control list. In this way, language-based protection model will provide security protection to the operating system. Thank you for watching this video.